Okay, so I know this might come off as a very random game to take a look at, but I've had a huge interest in the Mana series since I was a kid and played both Final Fantasy Adventure and its remake Sword of Mana. So when in high school I found out about a Mana game for the original PlayStation, I got really curious and a little excited. And recently, I've been in a bit of a Mana mood, so why don't we take a look at one of the many Mana games most people just don't seem to talk about. To start things off, we get some backstory as to the condition of the world. You see, many years ago, a great war broke out, and during the events of this war, the Mana tree was burnt down. To preserve the world, locations were sealed away in these artifacts. So the basic setup here is that you, the player character, male or female, are trying to find these artifacts to restore the world, and eventually bring back the Mana tree. This goal just kinda goes to the wayside due to the fact that this game is mostly comprised of little side quests and adventures. But personally, I don't mind this. I quite like this focus on many side events, as most of the characters who accompany you I found to be both memorable and interesting. Some of these characters even get their own overarching series of side quests, like Nico, the great warrior Lark, and the rather abrasive Elazul. Okay, I have no idea how to properly pronounce his name. These events will range from slaying dragons to restore someone's power, help this lady sell some lanterns, find some bratty little kids for a teacher, and deal with a centaur who keeps falling in love. At the same time, there is a kind of huge overarching story in the background involving these three characters who used to be friends, but due to different ideals, two of them became enemies. Even though I don't understand everything that's going on, I love this since it does deal with the fate of the world, and I got this feeling of being in the middle of a great epic battle between these two. So yeah, the story is a bit unorthodox, but I enjoy it since it spends more time getting a feel for this world and meeting so many characters and going to different locations. Alright, so this game is a little unusual in how it works compared to most others. You'll see what I mean. We'll start things off with how the game begins. First off, you get to choose if you want to play as the male or female character, and which weapon you want to start off with. Keep in mind, this isn't that important of a decision when it comes to your weapons, since you can buy all the others at shops. Then you get to pick where on the map your game will take place, and this is actually kind of important. Where you start your playthrough and how you place artifacts, don't worry, I'll explain that later, can have an effect on which events you'll be able to play, and what extras you'll have full access to. Now, from personal experience, not knowing the perfect setup doesn't lock you away from half the game. It's more like 10 to 20% of the game, and of that, there are about 2 or 3 events that are included in that. Okay, I know that's a bit confusing, but here's the gist of it. If you're playing without a guide, from what I understand, don't worry too much about where on the map to start your game. Otherwise, if it does concern you, by all means use a guide. In fact, either way, I would recommend using a guide when playing this game. After that, you get to place your first artifact. So, what is that anyway? Well, artifacts are special items you'll come across throughout the game that can be placed on the world map that then become new locations you can visit, whether it be towns or dungeons. Since this game focuses so much on side quests, you're not given a clear direction. Sometimes you'll access a side quest by entering a new area, and other times you need to talk to someone first. Both of these are perfectly fine. Sure, there are a few quests that you can quit and then come back to later, while others you can't, and you won't always know this. Hence why you should try to complete a quest the moment it starts, and you should still use a guide. Sure, you'll come across a fair amount of quests by going in blindly, but there are quests that you need to do in a specific order to unlock other quests, and some even have weird requirements for you to fill in certain quests to unlock later ones. For example, crushing so many crabs on the beach during the Summer Lovin' quest. Because of this, I again very much recommend playing Legend of Mana using an online guide. Trust me, the physical strategy guide isn't set up in the right order, and it will have you miss a very useful item. This way, you'll get to see how all the little side quests and character arcs finish, which to me is the game's biggest charm. So why don't we talk about about the quests for a bit. Quests divide up between two types, for the most part. Some quests have you running around talking to people, whether it's to sell items, get information, or to try to solve a mystery. Other type of quests require you to navigate a dungeon and fight a boss at the end. Most of these quests I do find fun, because of the characters involved, an interesting look into the lore of the world, or just really cool locations to visit. Sure, a few of the talking side quests can be rather vague about where you need to go next, but my real issue comes from specific dungeons. You see, all the dungeons will reuse backgrounds, which can make navigating them a bitch, especially dungeons that require you to move objects in order to open up other areas. This is the second biggest reason why I recommend playing with a guide. Trust me, locations like Mindus Ruins and the Tower of the Yaris are going to frustrate you if you're going in blind. I hate those goddamn flowering statues so much. So let's talk about the main gameplay. For the most part, Legend of Mana is a mixture of a beat 'em up with some RPG elements. Combat is only accessible in fights, where there are many different weapons you can play around with, from axes to swords to spears and bows, all having a heavy and light attack. The triangle and circle button can be customized to do other actions, like defending, crouching to heal since you can't use healing items, and dashing. I love this concept as it makes the combat experimental and offers variety. The issue is that fighting kinda sucks. Your character moves super stiff when fighting, and combos feel so limited. Sure, you might pull off something super cool, but from my experience, it'll happen only once, since it just means you've unlocked a new skill. All weapons have special moves that can be assigned to the L and R buttons, as well as instruments. Instruments, by the way, are your way of casting spells. The instrument determines the spell range, while that spirit changes its element. Again, great ideas, but the stiff movement in combat and a lack of effective combos makes fighting tedious. Hence why I first played through the game with a bow. It has a good range and fits the stiffness of the combat. You can level up by collecting crystals from defeated enemies, and you can also pick up golden items as well. Unfortunately, whether you're playing with a guide or not, the game lacks any consistent difficulty curve. Seriously, you'll come across later level bosses early on in the game, and it can get quite frustrating. Most towns will have shops for you to visit, like buying materials that you want, or buying better weapons and armor. Sometimes, party members will join you, and eventually there will be a few hanging around at your house. And when you have a party member along, a second player can join in and play as them, which I think is a neat idea. By doing specific quests, you can unlock extra features at your house, like the garden to grow your own fruit. When out adventuring or going to previous locations, you can come across monster eggs and befriend them with food to raise them as your own monster companions. Watts can become a blacksmith so he can make you the best weapons and armor, or modify your equipment. Not to mention, there is even an area where you can make golems. You can even try to catch spirits and make your own instruments, though this process is rather confusing and I never used it. I like all of this though, as it gives you more to do in the game aside from side quests. After you've beaten the game, you can start from the beginning, but you get to keep your level, equipment, and features at your house. That's what you've been seeing in this video. All footage is of my new Game Plus mode. I'm not gonna lie, I love the visual style of this game, as well as most of the other Mana games. Characters have such striking and well-detailed designs. Monsters range from cute to intimidating, and many of these locations have a great sense of atmosphere to them. I can't help myself. I love well-done sprite work, and this game excels with just how well animated its sprites are. Even if it's all 2D, I can't help but to be pulled into this world, with such cool towns like one by the ocean, and another with a nighttime feel to it. Then we have some neat forests, a junkyard of toys, a confusing tower, thick snowy fields, and a fortress made of dragon bones. Unfortunately, the repeating backgrounds can make navigating these locations less enjoyable, which is again why I would recommend playing this game with a guide. And then we have the great work of Yoko Shimomura, I hope I pronounced that correctly, who composed this game's soundtrack. We have great epic fantasy themes, lighthearted tunes, and pieces that convey mystery. I love this soundtrack, both classic Mana themes and new. Some of the songs that I would recommend listening to would be Colored Earth, Blue Melancholy, Nostalgic Song, and Beyond the Truth. I will say right away, this game certainly has its flaws. There's a lack of direction, inconsistent difficulty curve, and the combat is a hit or miss. Despite all this, I still enjoyed Legend of Mana. I love a lot of these characters. There are some cool locations, neat ideas for the combat that kinda work, and I just love how the game tries to pull you more into its world. It's not a game I could easily recommend to others, and I understand why people people don't like this game. Here's what I would say. If you like other mana games and want to get some more from its world, and you come across this game for a reasonable price, then I think it's worth giving a shot, as long as you're playing with a guide, which can help alleviate a lot of the frustration. I think a part of the reason as to why I came out of this game with such mixed feelings might have something to do with its development history, at least from what I understand. This game was once again under the creation of Ihihi, I think that's how you pronounce it, the series creator, and a producer new to the series, Kawazu. Again, I think that's how you pronounce it. It turns out that Ihi had a ton of ideas for this game, and Kawazu gave him a pretty lax budget and time schedule, until suddenly, about a couple months before the game's release, he realized that the project just wasn't quite finished yet, and had to really buckle down on Ihi on finishing this final project, and try to deal with Square about giving them a couple extra months before its original release. Which again, I think certainly helps explain why the game has some of the issues it does. So now that I'm done talking about a game I like that's really flawed, we can get back to starting up my next PlayStation 2 marathon. I'll explain more in the next video, so see you all then!